West. And his firm conviction was he could go it alone. But everywhere he hitchhiked, he was blessed and helped by people. They picked him up, first of all, on the side of the road. They offered him supper. They offered him lunch. Many people that picked him up offered jobs. They offered a place to crash, place to sleep, place to live and work in South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, all over the Southwest down to Arizona near the Grand Canyon region. And he was blessed by many people. But every time he got a taste of how good relationships could be, every time he formed some friendships, they'd last for maybe sometimes several weeks. Sometimes he was a month or so in a town, small towns in Nebraska and Colorado and that. But when things became a little too comfortable for him, he would just disappear. He would just take off, leaving people behind. Because he didn't want to get too connected with other people. Ironically, as he trekked across this country, he encountered lots and lots of people who helped him. He couldn't even have made it to Alaska apart from the help of many people. In fact, as I was reading his story, he's on that last hitchhike, that last route out of, I think, Fairbanks, and this trucker picks him up. And they start talking because it's an hour south out of Fairbanks towards the north slope of Mount McKinley, where he had, and all he had was just a little travel map. He said, this is where I'm going to do it. This is where I'm going to live off the land. And this trucker got to know him. The trucker said, are you sure, young man, you're ready for this? You don't look like you have the gear you need. And he warned him. He said, I mean, those boots are they're not insulated like they should be. And what's your rifle? What caliber? At 22? You need a bigger caliber for Alaska this time of year. What if you ran into a bear? And he said, well, I'll climb a tree. He said, son, look out the window here. You know, it was north of the tree line, and it was just open brush and alders and low willows. And finally, the trucker said, listen, why don't you just come home with me? Why don't you just come home with me? Another hour or so will be at my destination. My wife will put you up for a few days. You need to get rigged up better than this. And he said, no, I'm okay. Hey, please. And the kid said, no. This is what the trucker shared later as the author found him. He said, well, at least take this. And he gave him his lunch and everything, because Chris was carrying 10 pounds of dry rice and his rifle. And he was going to do this. As you read his story, you also notice that he had a lot of trouble with his dad, a lot of trouble with his own father. He was running from his family, running from other relationships. So Chris McCandless died alone because, for the most part, that is how he wanted to live his life. Okay, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. I can identify a little bit with Chris McCandless, and maybe you can. Ever since I was a boy, and it's true today, driving up 2 days ago from the Flint Hills in Manhattan, driving north up Highway 50, we fly over these beautiful hills, all this Flint Hills and cedar and open country and grass and cattle, and that's about it. And I've done this since I was a teenager. I'll be driving along, looking out the window, and I'm thinking, whoa, I'd love to live there, in back at that hollow, or back up that ravine, or you know, I've flown and driven all over this country in the last 40 years, from Key West, way down the corner, southeastern corner, all the way to the very end of Key West, stand there and looking and wondering if I can maybe see Cuba, and then turn and drive all across the southeast and all the way to Seattle, California, all the way to New England, all over this country. And when I drive, I'll be driving along, or my wife will be driving, I'll look out the window, and I'll think, whoa, that would be a great place. That little house out there would be a great place to live. All alone. No phone, no trouble. Just drop out. That would be cool, to be all alone. And for a time it kind of sounds good. But it never fulfills. Why? Because we weren't made that way. God made the great big we in the middle of every one of our lives. Why? Because we are created to be relational. We are created to be with others. We are created to need people. When we're born, we land in community. We find ourselves immediately in a community with others. We call it family. As we grow older, especially when you're a teenager, right into your 20s, you tend to think, Nah, I don't need anybody. Crazy. We think we're self-sufficient. We're not. We were created to be relational. We're created for people. But it's hard. It's hard, the people part. It's hard. We're created to live with people, but living with people is the whole issue here. And that's my focus here this morning. It's hard to live with people. Perhaps it's a roommate or even your spouse. Over these many years, I have lived with a very, very messy roommate. For almost 40 years, an incredibly messy roommate. Do you live with a roommate who's grumpy all the time? I do. Oh, Lord, forgive me. Who clams up and never wants to talk? I do. Do you live with a roommate who just doesn't want to seem to carry their weight? Tell me about it. Listen, I feel your pain. The problem with people is that people can be a problem sometimes. Write it down. We need to know the problem if we're going to solve it. The problem with people is that people can be a problem sometimes. Say, oh, Rick, okay, fine. Chris McCandless, he wandered off. I don't want to wander off. But I'm not sure I really want to get that close to the brother on my left, to the sister on my right. I'm just not sure. And the reason why is because people can be a problem sometimes. They can be a tremendous problem. Every one of us see it every day. You know how we see it? What kind of turkeys we are? How do you and I see it every day? I notice it when I'm driving. This world is filled with idiot drivers. I, of course, am an excellent driver. Little streets, little highways in the middle of the Flint Hills in Kansas, and I'm driving down the street, and it's Anderson or Bluemont, or maybe it's on Highway 24, but I'm in town. You know, you're going up Tuttle or whatever. It's no big deal. And it's a 2-lane. And somebody's coming at you, and you're here, and you're going to turn left to turn to the church building, and you're waiting on that car, and he's coming, and he's coming, and he's coming. You think, I'll just wait, because he has to go by me, so I can go left. My turn signal's on. He didn't signal. But he isn't coming straight. He comes slows down. Is he stopping? Is that idiot stopping? And now, is he turning right in front of me? Oh, I missed 5 seconds of my life. I can't believe he did that to me. My goodness. There's some construction on the east side of town in Manhattan. And different areas have been under construction. Not great big projects, but 2 lanes become 1. I, of course, deserve to be in the lead. And if I'm beside somebody, I'm surprised, and he speeds up, and he gets ahead of me so that I have to go in behind him. But isn't this world, I mean, my goodness, this whole world is filled with idiot drivers. I can't believe it. Turn signals, passing lanes. Driving reveals the wicked heart of men. Not mine. People are the problem. When we're talking about community, we're talking about the church. It's people. 1 John 3:16, though, we need to get over it. We need to get over it. And there's a warning in 1 John 3:16. Read this scripture with me. We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. But whoever has the world's goods and beholds his brother in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God abide in him? Little children, let us not love with word or with tongue, but in deed and truth. Closes his heart against him. That's where it starts. We get angry about drivers. We get angry about parents. We get angry about small groups. We get angry about roommates. We become separate in our heart. We close our heart against our brother, against members in our church. And the Lord asks, how does the love of God abide in you, Rick, when you do that? We shouldn't do that. We cannot afford to close our heart against Him. 1 John 4, verse 20 says, if someone says, I love God and hates his brother, he is a liar. If someone says, I love God and hates his brother, he is a liar. For the one who does not love his brother, whom he has seen, cannot love God, whom he has not seen. And this commandment we have from Him, that the one who loves God should love his brother also. Like the spokes of a wheel. The closer you get to the hub, the closer you are to each other. You think you love God? Be careful. If you think in your heart of hearts, I love God, I just am having trouble with this brother. This is our scripture. 1 John 4:20. Someone says, I love God. Yeah, I love God. But I just can't get along with that brother or that sister. God says to us, graciously, lovingly and honestly, He says to us, you are a liar. You're lying to yourself, Rick. For the one who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. This commandment we have from Him, that the one who loves God should love his brother also. You can turn it around. I love God. I do not love God any more than I struggle with, and I say this with gentleness, but in our minds and in our hearts we judge each other. I do not love God any more than I love the lowest brother that I hang with. I don't know what the lowest brother is, because God says, wait a minute, Rick, Whitney, all men and all women are made in my image. You look on the outward, I look on the heart. You have no idea what you're thinking, what you're doing here. This scripture warns me. I can't say I love God more than I love my lowest brother. If I even think that, I cannot say it. Disciples together. This is the church. This is the church. Disciples together. Church has enemies. My brother's been speaking about this here in Omaha. I believe it. The church does have enemies. And I believe that the worst enemy to the church is what? What do you think the worst enemy to the church is in America today? Is it our culture? I'm concerned about our culture. I'm not worried. I'm not overly concerned about our culture, because I know really where the problem lies. It's not our culture. It's not politics. It's not the economy. It's not. Disciples together, that's the church. The church does have enemies. I believe that the worst enemy to the church is us. The worst enemy to the church is us. The cartoon strip, Pogo, the young guy goes off to the front. He comes back and he's reporting to his superior, his sergeant. And the sergeant says, okay, you scouted out the front lines. Report. And he responds back and he says, sir, we have met the enemy. Sir, we have met the enemy, and they is us. We're the problem. Our attitude towards each other and towards our leaders, this affects the health and spirit of your life group, of your house church, of your whole church. Our love and respect for each other affects everyone. I'll ask a couple more questions. Do you ever catch yourself worrying about another believer? About all the things they're doing wrong? All the things that they should work on, Let's be more frank. Have you been in a household situation and a roommate walks in and just explodes? All kinds of vile stuff and everything else. What should you do? What should I do? That doesn't happen in my house. But I've been in situations where it does. Here's what you should do. When you're frustrated with another believer, stop. And stop it right now. Pray for them. Instead of looking down on them, move below them in your heart. Instead of looking down on them, move below them in your heart. Remember that you and I are servants. We're here to help others, to not get mad at others. But have you ever discipled someone who has walked away from the faith? They prayed with you, you really got to know them, you became good friends, then they walked away. Here's an example of what you might do. Here's possibly what you should say. If you choose to live this way, then we cannot be together. I'm going to get into this because